The howl of the bitter winter wind seemed to carry the last of Rebecca Wallace's hope away into the vast Wyoming Territory wilderness. She pressed her back against the cabin's rough-hewn door, listening to her 4-year-old daughter's whimpers coming from the small bed in the corner. 3 days without proper food, and little Lily's normally bright eyes had grown dull, her small frame even more delicate against the threadbare blanket. "It'll be all right, sweetheart," Rebecca whispered, though her own stomach twisted with hunger pangs that had become a constant companion. "Mama's going to figure something out." Outside, the February blizzard of 1877 showed no signs of relenting. It had been the harshest winter anyone in these parts could remember, and for Rebecca, widowed just 6 months prior when Thomas had been thrown from his horse and broken his neck, it had become a daily battle for survival. The small cabin, once a symbol of their dreams, now felt like a prison of poverty. Thomas had been a good man, but not a particularly forward-thinking one. He'd left her with little more than this cabin, a plot of land too frozen to work, and memories that stung more sharply than the cold. Rebecca moved to the hearth where the last of their firewood burned pitifully low. The food stores had dwindled to a handful of dried beans and a small sack of flour with more weevils than substance. She had stretched it as far as she could, giving most of her share to Lily, but now there was virtually nothing left. She glanced at her daughter, so thin that Rebecca could count her ribs through her nightdress, and made a decision. Storm or no storm, she would have to make the trek into town tomorrow. There were people there who might help, though pride had kept her from asking before. Pride meant little now compared to her daughter's hollow cheeks. "Mama, I'm hungry," Lily whispered, her voice so small it nearly broke Rebecca's heart all over again. "I know, baby. Try to sleep. Tomorrow will be better." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, but she forced a smile. As Rebecca settled beside her daughter, pulling her close for warmth, she closed her eyes and prayed for a miracle. Outside, the wind screamed across the prairie, drowning out her whispered pleas. She must have drifted off, because the sound that woke her wasn't the wind but a firm knock at the door. Rebecca bolted upright, disoriented and frightened. Night visitors in this wilderness were rare and rarely brought good news. "Who's there?" She called, reaching for Thomas's old rifle unloaded, as they'd used the last of the ammunition hunting in December. "Madam, anybody alive in there?" A man's deep voice carried through the wooden door, surprisingly gentle despite its volume. Rebecca hesitated, then moved to the door, keeping the rifle visible. "State your business." "The name's Reese Jameson, madam. I was passing through and saw your chimney smoke. Figured with this storm might be someone could use some supplies." Suspicious but desperate, Rebecca cracked the door, keeping the rifle between them. The biting wind immediately rushed in, along with snow and the imposing silhouette of a man in a heavy coat. Even in the dim light of the cabin, she could make out his features tall and broad-shouldered, with a face partially obscured by a scarf but revealing keen eyes beneath the brim of a snow-covered hat. He carried saddlebags over one shoulder and held what appeared to be a wrapped package. "Passing through, in this blizzard?" Rebecca questioned, her voice sharp with distrust. The man Reese pulled down his scarf, revealing a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of beard. "Got caught in it about 10 miles back. Been making slow progress toward Sweetwater." Wasn't expecting to find anybody out this far. His gaze moved past her to where Lily lay watching with wide eyes. Something in his expression softened. "Looks like I found you just in time." Rebecca's grip tightened on the rifle. "We're managing." "No offense intended, madam, but you don't look like you're managing too well." He held out the package. "I've got some jerky, beans, coffee, and cornmeal. Would be honored if you'd accept them." The smell of food, real food, wafted from the package, and Rebecca's stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, but Reese tactfully pretended not to notice. "Why would you give food to strangers?" she asked, still not lowering the rifle. His eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. "Because my ma taught me decent folk help each other out, especially in weather like this." He paused, then added more softly, "And because that little one looks like she could use a good meal." Rebecca hesitated just a moment longer before slowly lowering the rifle. Pride warred with necessity, and necessity won. "Thank you," she said quietly, stepping back to allow him entry. Reese stamped the snow from his boots before entering, moving with the careful deliberation of a man accustomed to small spaces. Despite his size, there was something unthreatening in his manner as he set down his saddlebags and unwrapped the package of food on the small table. "Got a horse outside needs shelter too if you've got a lean-to or something similar," he said. "There's a small stable around back," Rebecca replied, watching as he laid out more food than she'd seen in weeks: salt pork, a small sack of potatoes, coffee beans, and the promised jerky and cornmeal. Lily had sat up in bed, her eyes fixed on the food. "Mama," she whispered, a question and plea in that single word. Reese glanced between them. "Madam, if you'll allow me, I could cook up something warm while you tend to your daughter." Rebecca wanted to refuse letting a strange man take over her kitchen went against every instinct, but the thought of hot food overrode her caution. She nodded once, sharply. "I'll see to your horse first." "Much obliged, but I'll handle that. You stay with your little girl." He rewrapped himself in his heavy coat. "I'll be quick." When the door closed behind him, Lily whispered, "Mama, is the man going to help us?" Rebecca moved to the bed and smoothed her daughter's tangled blonde hair. "It seems so, sweetheart. Is he an angel?" Lily asked with all the earnestness of childhood. Despite everything, Rebecca smiled. "No, just a traveler with good timing." She glanced toward the door. "And food." True to his word, Reese returned quickly, bringing with him saddlebags that clinked with the promising sound of cooking utensils. Without asking permission, he stoked the dying fire, adding logs from a bundle he'd apparently brought in from his supplies. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the firewood. "Noticed you were running low." Rebecca watched silently as he moved with efficient ease, setting up a cooking arrangement with a small iron pot from his supplies. There was something hypnotic about his movements, practiced, confident, but without showmanship. "Where are you headed?" she finally asked as he began slicing potatoes. "Sweetwater, like I mentioned. Got a job waiting at a ranch there." He glanced up with a half smile. "What about you folks? Husband around?" The question sent a pang through Rebecca's chest. "My husband passed last summer. It's just Lily and me now." Reese's hands stilled for just a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Wallace, Rebecca Wallace, and that's Lily." He nodded respectfully. "Mrs. Wallace, Miss Lily." He returned to his cooking, adding the salt pork to the pot, and soon the cabin filled with the rich aroma of food. Rebecca didn't realize she had been staring until Reese spoke again. "Been on your own through this whole winter?" he asked, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp with something that might have been concern. "We've managed," she repeated, though the evidence of their failing management was clear in the barren cabin and her daughter's thin frame. Reese didn't challenge her directly. Instead, he said, "Toughest winter I've seen in years. Even the old-timers in the last town were saying so." Within 30 minutes, he had produced a hearty stew that seemed miraculous given the simple ingredients. Rebecca helped Lily to the table, her heart twisting at how her daughter's eyes widened at the sight of the steaming bowls. "Careful now, it's hot," Reese cautioned as he served them both before taking a more modest portion for himself. Rebecca had to force herself not to devour the food too quickly. Beside her, Lily ate with the single-minded focus of the truly hungry, her small hands trembling slightly around her spoon. "There's plenty more," Reese said quietly, "and I can leave you with enough to last a while." Rebecca looked up sharply. "We don't need charity." His expression remained neutral. "It's not charity to help neighbors through a hard winter, it's just being human. We're not neighbors, you're passing through. Then consider it payment for the stable space," he countered easily. "And maybe for letting me wait out the worst of this storm before moving on. Might be a day or two if you can spare the room." Rebecca wanted to refuse, but practicality won out. The food was too valuable to turn away, and having another adult in the cabin during the blizzard meant better odds of survival. Still, she wasn't about to surrender her dignity entirely. "You can sleep by the fire," she said firmly, "and I expect you to earn your keep." Reese's lips twitched with what might have been amusement. "Yes, madam. I'm handy with repairs, hunting, and cooking, as you've seen. Just point me where I'm needed." As they finished eating, Lily's eyelids began to droop, her small body finally relaxing with the comfort of a full stomach. Rebecca carried her back to bed, tucking the blankets around her. "Thank you for the food, mister," Lily murmured sleepily. "You're welcome, Miss Lily," Reese replied with unexpected gentleness. "Sleep tight now." When Rebecca returned to the table, Reese was already cleaning up, his movements quiet and unobtrusive. She watched him for a moment, trying to reconcile this stranger's kindness with her wariness. "Why did you really stop here?" she asked finally. Reese turned, drying his hands on a cloth. "Told you, saw the smoke. There are other homesteads between here and town. Why this one?" He considered her for a long moment. "Truth, I wasn't planning to stop anywhere, but coming over that ridge I saw something." He hesitated, then continued more softly. "Saw a woman standing outside, looking like she was gathering courage to walk into that blizzard. Made me think maybe someone here needed help more than others." Rebecca felt her face flush. He had seen her earlier, contemplating her desperate trek to town. The thought that her vulnerability had been witnessed made her stiffen. "We would have been fine," she said, though they both knew it wasn't true. "Course you would," he agreed easily. "You strike me as capable, Mrs. Wallace, but even capable folks sometimes get dealt a bad hand." He gestured vaguely at the cabin. No shame in that. His lack of judgment somehow made it harder to maintain her wall of pride. Rebecca felt something crack inside her, not completely, but enough to let out a small truth. "I didn't know what else to do," she admitted. "The food ran out faster than I expected. I thought I could make it to spring." Reese nodded, his eyes serious. "Winter like this one catches everyone unprepared, even those who have been out here for decades." A comfortable silence fell between them as he finished cleaning up. Rebecca found herself studying him more openly, the way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the strength in his hands, the crow's feet around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way Thomas had been, but there was something compelling in his features, a kind of quiet steadiness. "You should get some rest," he said eventually. "I'll keep the fire going." Rebecca hesitated, unused to relinquishing control of her household to anyone, let alone a stranger. But exhaustion pulled at her, and the warmth of food in her stomach made her eyelids heavy. "Wake me if Lily needs anything," she said. "I will." As Rebecca settled beside her daughter, she found herself wondering about the man who now sat by her hearth. Where had he come from? What had he seen in his travels? What kind of man stopped in a blizzard to help strangers with no expectation of return? These questions followed her into dreams, the first restful sleep she'd had in months, with a full stomach and the knowledge that, at least for tonight, someone else was standing guard. The blizzard raged through the night, but Rebecca slept soundly, waking only once to find Reese still by the fire, whittling something from a small piece of wood, his expression contemplative in the firelight. Their eyes met briefly before she drifted back to sleep, somehow reassured by his vigilant presence. Morning brought a temporary lull in the storm. Rebecca woke to the smell of coffee, real coffee, not the chicory substitute she'd been using to stretch her supply, and the sound of Lily's delighted laughter. She sat up to find Reese seated at the table with Lily, showing her a small wooden figure he must have carved during the night. It was a horse, simple but recognizable, with surprisingly delicate details considering it had been made by firelight. "Look, Mama," Lily held up the toy, her face brighter than it had been in weeks. "Mr. Reese made it for me." "It's lovely," Rebecca said, running a hand through her tangled hair, suddenly conscious of her appearance. She hadn't properly seen to herself in days, conserving water and energy. Reese stood when he noticed her awake. "Hope we didn't wake you." "Miss Lily here has been telling me all about the animals she's seen around your homestead." "She's quite the observer," Rebecca replied, reaching for her shawl and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Coffee's hot," Reese offered, gesturing to the pot on the stove. "And there's some cornbread." "Nothing fancy." Rebecca accepted a cup gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma before taking a sip. "Thank you." "I checked your woodpile this morning," Reese said as he returned to his seat. "You're running mighty low. I figure while this break in the weather holds, I could cut some more for you." Rebecca bristled slightly at the implication that she couldn't manage on her own, but the practical side of her acknowledged the truth in his assessment. "There's an axe in the lean-to," Handle's loose, though. I can fix that. He finished his coffee and stood. Miss Lily, how about you help your mama while I see to that wood? Lily nodded solemnly, clearly taken with their visitor. As Reese donned his coat and headed outside, Rebecca helped her daughter dress for the day, noting with concern how Lily's clothes hung on her frame. I like Mr. Reese, Lily declared as Rebecca buttoned her dress. He tells good stories. Oh, what stories did he tell you? About his horse Samson, and about the mountains and the big cities back east? Lily's eyes were wide with wonder. He's been everywhere, Mama, Rebecca smiled despite herself. I'm not sure everywhere is accurate, sweetheart. Well, more places than us, Lily countered with the irrefutable logic of childhood. Can he stay with us forever? The question caught Rebecca off guard. No, honey, Mr. Jameson is just passing through. He has a job waiting for him. Lily's face fell. But he helps us, and he makes you smile. I smile plenty, Rebecca protested, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. Smiles had been scarce these past months, not like when he's here, Lily insisted. You smile with your eyes again. Rebecca was saved from responding by the rhythmic sound of axe striking wood. She moved to the window and watched as Reese split logs with efficient strength, his breath fogging in the cold air. There was something mesmerizing about the fluid motion, the certainty of each swing. Throughout the day, Reese worked steadily, repairing the loose axe handle, splitting enough wood to last weeks, and even finding time to reinforce the lean to where the snow's weight had begun to damage the roof. Rebecca found herself watching him more often than she'd care to admit, struck by the contrast between his capability and Thomas's well-meaning but often ineffective attempts at homesteading. Thomas had been a dreamer, full of grand plans but short on practical skills. He'd brought her west with promises of land and opportunity, only to discover that claiming land and making it profitable were vastly different challenges. Rebecca had loved him, but she'd also spent 3 years compensating for his shortcomings, learning to hunt, to repair, to manage when his attention inevitably wandered to the next exciting possibility. Reese, by contrast, seemed to approach each task with quiet competence, neither boasting about his abilities nor apologizing for them. By mid-afternoon, he had accomplished more than Thomas might have in a week. When he finally came inside, stamping snow from his boots, his cheeks were ruddy with cold and exertion. Storm's picking up again, he reported. Got a good pile of wood stacked, though. Should last you a while. Thank you, Rebecca said, handing him a cup of hot coffee. Their fingers brushed briefly during the exchange, sending an unexpected warmth through her hand. She withdrew quickly, disconcerted by her reaction. You didn't have to do all that. Didn't mind. He sipped the coffee appreciatively. Feels good to be useful. That evening, as another meal filled their bellies and the cabin stayed properly warm for the first time in weeks, Rebecca found herself relaxing slightly in Reese's company. Lily had taken to him completely, peppering him with questions about his travels and listening raptly to his answers. For his part, Reese seemed to genuinely enjoy her daughter's curiosity, answering each question with patience and often a touch of humor. Have you ever seen buffalo? Lily asked as she helped Rebecca clear the dishes. I have, Reese confirmed. Great herds of them, stretching as far as you could see across the plains. Papa said they're almost all gone now, Lily said with childish solemnity. A shadow crossed Reese's face. Your papa was right about that. Too many hunters, not enough thought for tomorrow. You hunt, Rebecca pointed out, curious about his reaction. I hunt what I need to eat, he clarified. Not for sport or profit. My father taught me that take what you need, leave the rest for others and for future seasons. He glanced at Lily. It's like the story of the ant and the grasshopper. You remember that one? Lily shook her head. Well then, if your mama doesn't mind, I could tell it to you before bed. Rebecca nodded her permission, and soon Lily was curled up in Reese's unexpected storytelling, proved to be animated and engaging, complete with different voices for the characters. Rebecca found herself pausing in her chores to listen, caught by the simple joy on her daughter's face. When Lily finally drifted off to sleep, Reese joined Rebecca by the fire. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the crackle of burning wood the only sound between them. You're good with her, Rebecca observed finally. Reese smiled slightly. Kids are easy to please. Just need to listen to them, mostly. You have children of your own, a flicker of something regret perhaps crossed his features. No, never had the chance to settle down that way. The cowboy life doesn't allow for it, he shrugged. It can for some, I just never found the right situation, I guess. Rebecca sensed there was more to the story, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "How long have you been on the trail?" "Most of my adult life. Started cowboying when I was 17, right after the war. Worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas for years, then started drifting westward." His gaze turned reflective. "Seen a lot of country that way. And now Sweetwater, figured it's time to put down some roots, getting too old for the constant moving." He rubbed absently at his knee. "Ranch manager position opened up. Pays decent, includes housing. Seems like a good opportunity." "It does," Rebecca agreed, trying to ignore the small pang she felt at the confirmation that his presence here was indeed temporary. "Sweetwater's a growing town, from what I hear." "You've never been," she shook her head. "Thomas, my husband, he liked the isolation out here, said it meant we answered to no one but ourselves." A trace of bitterness crept into her voice. "Of course, it also means no one's around to help when things go wrong." Must have been hard, losing him and facing winter alone. Rebecca stared into the flames. "The losing him part wasn't as hard as it should have been," she admitted quietly, surprising herself with her honesty. "We'd been drifting apart. The isolation that he loved was suffocating me. We argued about moving closer to town, about the future." She glanced toward Lily. "About what was best for her." Reese nodded, his expression free of judgment. "Frontier living isn't for everyone. No shame in wanting community." "That's what I told him, but Thomas was stubborn. Said we'd made our choice and had to stick it out." She sighed. "When he died, part of me thought maybe Lily and I could finally leave, but there was no money for moving, and then winter came early. And now you're trapped. Until spring, at least." She wrapped her arms around herself. "If we make it that long." Reese studied her for a moment. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Mrs. Wallace. You've kept you and your daughter alive under circumstances that would break many." His words, spoken with quiet certainty, touched something deep inside Rebecca, a need for acknowledgement that she hadn't realized was so acute. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she blinked them away, unwilling to show such vulnerability. "Well," she said, striving for a lighter tone, "we've made it this far, and thanks to your supplies, we'll make it a bit further." Reese seemed to sense her need to step back from the emotional precipice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a deck of cards. "Know how to play rummy." The simple offer of distraction was exactly what Rebecca needed. "I do, though I should warn you, I'm quite good." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "That sounds like a challenge, Mrs. Wallace." They played cards late into the evening, their conversation flowing more easily as they shared stories, his of cattle drives and frontier towns, hers of life back east before Thomas brought her west. Rebecca found herself laughing more than she had in months, perhaps years, and when she finally bid him good night, there was a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. As she lay beside Lily, listening to the storm resume its assault on the cabin, Rebecca found herself acutely aware of Reese's presence in the next room. There was something disturbing about her reaction to him, this quick trust, this ease. She had known the man barely a day, yet already he had become a fixture in their small world, altering its dimensions in ways she couldn't quite articulate. It was dangerous, she knew, to become dependent on someone who would soon ride away. Yet as sleep claimed her, Rebecca couldn't help but feel grateful for his timely arrival and secretly hopeful that the storm might last just a little longer. The blizzard obliged, continuing for 3 more days with only brief interludes of relative calm. During that time, a rhythm developed in the cabin. Reese handled the outdoor tasks, tending to his horse and Rebecca's remaining livestock, a stubborn milk cow and 2 chickens, maintaining the woodpile, and making small repairs to the cabin that Rebecca had been forced to neglect. Inside, Rebecca cooked and mended, gradually regaining her strength with regular meals. Lily blossomed under the improved conditions, her cheeks filling out slightly, her energy returning. She shadowed Reese whenever possible, clearly starved for male attention after months without her father. To Rebecca's surprise, Reese seemed genuinely to enjoy Lily's company. He taught her simple card games, whittled more small toys, and answered her endless questions with remarkable patience. In the evenings, he would tell stories some clearly from his own experiences, others tall tales of the West that made Lily's eyes go wide. On the third night, as Lily dozed off during one such story, Rebecca found herself studying Reese's profile in the firelight. There was a gentleness to him that belied his rugged exterior, a thoughtfulness she hadn't expected from a man who had spent his life on the trail. "What?" he asked, catching her gaze. Rebecca felt her cheeks warm. "I was just thinking you don't fit what I imagined of cowboys." He smiled slightly. "And what did you imagine?" "I don't know, someone rougher, less." She gestured vaguely, searching for the word. "Domesticated," he offered with a raised eyebrow. Rebecca laughed softly. "Perhaps. Thomas always talked about cowboys as being little more than wandering troublemakers." "Some are," Reese acknowledged, "but most are just men trying to make a living in a hard country, same as anyone else." He stretched his long legs toward the fire. "Though I'll admit, some take to the wandering part more than others. Gets in your blood, the open country." "Is that why you've never settled?" she asked, returning to their earlier conversation. Reese was quiet for a moment, his expression becoming more serious. "Partly, but there was someone once, thought we might make a life together." His voice took on a distant quality. "Ellen was her name. Met her in Colorado, at her ranch where I was working. She was the owner's niece, come out west after losing her parents." Rebecca waited as he gathered his thoughts, sensing this wasn't a story he told often. "We were young. I was 23, she was 20. Made all these plans I'd save up, buy a small spread, we'd build something together." A shadow crossed his face. "Then the mountain fever came through, took half the county, including Ellen." "I'm sorry," Rebecca said softly. He shrugged, though the casualness of the gesture was belied by the tightness around his eyes. "Was a long time ago now, 16 years this spring. And you never found someone else. After that, the moving just seemed easier. New places, new faces, nothing to tie me down, nothing to lose." He gave her a rueful smile. "Sounds cowardly, saying it out loud." "No," Rebecca said, surprising herself with the vehemence of her response. "It sounds human." She hesitated, then added, "After Thomas died, there were days I considered just walking away from everything, the cabin, the land, the memories. Just taking Lily and starting fresh somewhere no one knew us." "Why didn't you?" "No money, no plan." She smiled wryly. "And if I'm honest, fear of the unknown. At least here I know what I'm fighting against." Reese nodded thoughtfully. "The devil you know." "Exactly." Rebecca glanced at her sleeping daughter. "But sometimes I wonder if I'm doing her a disservice staying. What kind of life can I give her out here, alone?" "You won't always be alone," Reese said, his voice gentle. "Spring will come, options will open up." The simple reassurance, offered without platitudes or false promises, comforted Rebecca more than any elaborate plan might have. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. "And what about you?" she asked. "This ranch job in Sweetwater, is it just another stop or something more permanent? Honestly, I'm not sure." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign he was thinking deeply. "Part of me still wants roots. A place that's mine, faces that know me year after year, but after so long on the move." He shrugged. "Hard to know if I'd even recognize home anymore." The vulnerability in his admission created a connection between them, two people adrift in different ways, both searching for solid ground. Rebecca felt an impulse to reach out, to bridge the physical gap between them as they had the emotional one, but restrained herself. Whatever this growing understanding between them was, it had no future. In a day or two, weather permitting, he would ride on to Sweetwater, and they would once again face the winter alone. The thought sat like a stone in her chest, heavier than she cared to examine. Morning brought clearing skies and a drop in temperature that made the snow crunch underfoot. Rebecca opened the cabin door to find the world transformed into a blinding expanse of white, the sun reflecting off the snow with diamond brilliance. Reese stood by the lean-to, axe in hand, apparently taking advantage of the improved weather to split more wood. He straightened when he saw her, lifting a hand in greeting. "Looks like the storm's finally moving on," he called, Rebecca nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. You'll be able to travel soon. Seems so. He set down the axe and walked toward her, his breath clouding in the frigid air. Thought I might check the trail today, see how passable it is. Of course. Rebecca clasped her hands tightly together. You've already stayed longer than you intended. Reese studied her face. I wasn't complaining. Still, you have a job waiting. We've taken enough of your time. Something flickered in his eyes, concern, perhaps, or a question he wasn't sure how to ask. You'll be all right. The supplies should last a while, but we'll be fine, Rebecca interrupted, more sharply than she'd intended. The thought of returning to their previous precarious existence made her defensive. We managed before, Rebecca. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it caught her attention immediately. I'm not questioning your capability, He glanced past her to where Lily could be seen through the window playing with her wooden horse. I worry is all. The simple admission disarmed her. Rebecca sighed, her defensive posture softening. I know, and I'm grateful for your concern, truly, but you can't delay your plans for us, we'll make do. Reese nodded slowly, though he didn't look convinced. At least let me go hunting before I leave. There's game out there if you know where to look. Could set you up with some fresh meat. All right, Rebecca agreed, unable to refuse such a practical offer. Thank you. He returned to his wood splitting, and Rebecca went back inside, her emotions in turmoil. She had known from the beginning that Reese's presence was temporary, yet somehow the reality of his imminent departure felt like a fresh loss. Lily, intuitive as always, noticed her mother's distraction. Is Mr. Reese leaving? She asked as Rebecca mechanically went about her morning chores. Yes, sweetheart, soon, the weather's clearing. Lily's face fell. But I don't want him to go. I know, but Mr. Reese has his own life, his own plans. We can't keep him here. Can't we ask him to stay? Lily persisted. He likes us, I can tell. Rebecca knelt to her daughter's level. Liking someone isn't always enough, Lily. People have responsibilities, commitments. Papa always said family is the most important commitment. The innocent observation struck Rebecca with unexpected force. Family had indeed been Thomas's mantra, though his actions hadn't always aligned with his words. That's true, but we're not Mr. Reese's family. Lily considered this with a child's directness. We could be. Lily, Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. That's not how things work. Why not? He makes you happy, he helps us, he tells good stories. Lily ticked off these qualities on her small fingers as if assembling an irrefutable argument, and he looks at you like Papa used to in the beginning. Rebecca was saved from responding by Reese's return. He stamped snow from his boots before entering, carrying an armload of wood that he stacked neatly by the fireplace. Trail's not great, but it's passable, he reported. Another day of clear weather should improve it further. He glanced between Rebecca and Lily, seeming to sense the tension. Everything all right, fine, Rebecca said quickly, turning back to the stove. Just discussing plans. Reese nodded, though his eyes lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary. Thought I'd head out hunting this afternoon, if that's all right. Saw some deer tracks about a half-mile west. Of course, we appreciate it. Lily tugged at Reese's sleeve. Can I come with you? I'll be quiet, I promise. Lily, no, Rebecca began, but Reese held up a hand. It's mighty cold out there, Miss Lily, and hunting requires a lot of sitting still. But how about this when I get back? I'll teach you how to prepare whatever I bring. That's an important skill, too. Lily considered this compromise. Like skinning and everything? Well, maybe not everything on your first lesson, Reese said with a smile, but we can start with the basics. This satisfied Lily, who skipped off to retrieve her wooden menagerie, leaving the adults in momentary privacy. Thank you for being gentle with her, Rebecca said quietly. She's grown attached. She's a special girl, Reese replied, his voice warm. You've done well with her, especially under the circumstances. The praise, simple and sincere, touched Rebecca deeply. Sometimes I wonder, don't. Reese's gaze was steady. Children know when they're loved. Everything else is just details. Before Rebecca could respond, he had gathered his hunting gear and headed back outside, leaving her with a strange mixture of gratitude and longing that she wasn't quite ready to examine. The afternoon passed slowly. Lily napped, exhausted from the excitement of the past few days, while Rebecca sorted through their meager possessions, taking inventory of what needed repair or replacement come spring. The task was both practical and symbolic, a way of reassuring herself that there would be a spring, that she and Lily would survive to see it. When Reese returned, the sun was already low in the sky, casting long blue shadows across the snow. Rebecca heard him at the lean-to before he entered the cabin and stepped outside to find him cleaning a young buck, his movements efficient and practiced. "Good hunting," she observed, wrapping her shawl tightly against the cold. He looked up, a smile breaking across his face. "Better than I expected. Deer's skinny after this winter, but it's meat." "It's a blessing," Rebecca corrected, genuinely relieved at the sight of the fresh game. "Thank you." Reese continued his work, setting aside the best cuts. "Figure we can cook some tonight, but most of it should be dried or smoked for preserving. I can show you how if you'd like. I'd appreciate that." Rebecca hesitated, then added, "Thomas wasn't much of a hunter. We bought most of our meat in town when we could afford it." "Hunting takes practice," Reese said diplomatically, "and patience, neither of which were Thomas's strong suits," Rebecca admitted with a small smile. "He was all grand plans and sweeping gestures. Details bored him. Makes for an interesting life, I suppose." "It does." "Though not always a practical one." She watched his hands work, steady and sure. "You're the opposite, aren't you? Details matter to you." Reese considered this. "I think they have to in my line of work. One loose cinch, one missed sign on the trail, and things can go wrong fast." He glanced up at her. "But I admire dreamers, too. They're the ones who see possibilities the rest of us miss." The generosity of this perspective, finding value in a temperament so different from his own, struck Rebecca forcefully. Thomas, for all his charm, had often been dismissive of those who didn't share his visionary outlook. "You're a kind man, Reese Jameson," she said softly. He looked momentarily disconcerted by the compliment, his hands stilling on the knife. "Just practical is all." Rebecca might have said more, but Lily appeared at the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When she spotted Reese and his catch, she brightened immediately. "You got one," she exclaimed, hurrying down the steps despite Rebecca's warning to be careful. "Is it time for my lesson?" Reese chuckled. "Let me finish the main work first, Miss Lily. Then you can help with the cuts for tonight's dinner." True to his word, Reese involved Lily in the final preparations, teaching her the proper way to handle a knife under Rebecca's watchful eye, and explaining which parts of the deer were best for different uses. Lily absorbed the information eagerly, her pride evident when Reese praised her careful attention. That evening, they feasted on venison steaks, savoring the fresh meat after weeks of increasingly sparse meals. The warmth and fullness created a sense of contentment in the small cabin, a feeling so rare in recent months that Rebecca found herself trying to memorize every detail: the golden light from the fire, Lily's animated chatter, Reese's deep laughter at her daughter's observations. After Lily was asleep, Reese and Rebecca worked together to prepare the remaining meat for smoking. Their movements around the small kitchen area became a kind of dance, each anticipating the other's needs, passing tools and ingredients without words. "You're a quick study," Reese remarked as Rebecca deftly tied bundles of meat for hanging. "Necessity is a thorough teacher," she replied, though she was pleased by the compliment. Still, not everyone picks things up so readily. A comfortable silence fell between them as they finished their task. Outside, the night was clear and bitter cold, stars pricking the black sky with sharp brilliance. Inside, the cabin had never felt more like a home to Rebecca, warm, safe, filled with the promise of future meals and quiet companionship. It was this last thought that brought her back to reality with a jolt. The companionship was temporary. By tomorrow, or the next day at latest, Reese would be gone, continuing his journey to Sweetwater and the job that awaited him there. "Weather should hold tomorrow," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Trail will be passable." Rebecca nodded, focusing intently on the bundle in her hands. "You'll want an early start, I imagine. Probably best." He hesitated, then added, "I was thinking, though, Sweetwater's not that far. Once I'm settled, I could ride back this way, check on you and Lily. Bring more supplies, maybe." The offer was generous, but Rebecca's pride bristled. "We'll be fine. The meat will help enormously," Reese studied her face. "It's not charity I'm offering, Rebecca." "Then what is it?" she challenged, meeting his gaze directly. He seemed to struggle for words, unusual for a man who generally spoke with such measured certainty. "Concern. For two people I've come to care about." The slight pause before care hung between them, suggesting deeper emotions that neither was prepared to name. Rebecca felt her heart beat faster, and she looked away, suddenly afraid of what might be revealed in her own expression. "That's kind of you," she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. "But unnecessary. Spring will come soon enough, and then we'll have options. Such as, I could sell the cabin for one. There's always someone looking for established homesteads, even remote ones. The money would get us to a town where I could find work." "What kind of work do you have in mind?" Rebecca had given this considerable thought during the long winter nights. "I was a teacher before I married Thomas. I could do that again, or work in a store or take in laundry if necessary." She straightened her shoulders. "I'm not afraid of hard work." "I never thought you were," Reese said quietly, "but starting over alone isn't easy. I won't be alone, I'll have Lily. A child is a blessing, but not the same as having a partner." Rebecca set down the bundle she was holding, suddenly weary. "I had a partner, Reese. It didn't save us from this situation." He acknowledged this with a nod. "Fair point." They finished their work in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. When the last of the meat was prepared, Reese wiped his hands on a cloth and stepped toward the door. "I should check on Samson, make sure he's settled for the night." Rebecca nodded, watching as he donned his coat and hat. The familiar routine, his departure to tend to his horse, her remaining in the cabin with Lily, had become comforting over the past few days. Tonight, however, it carried the weight of impending finality. After he left, Rebecca moved to the window, watching as Reese crossed to the lean-to, his figure a dark silhouette against the snow. In just days, he had transformed their desperate situation, bringing not just food and warmth, but also a sense of security that Rebecca had almost forgotten was possible. The thought of returning to their previous isolation after experiencing such connection was almost unbearable. Yet what alternative was there? Reese had his own path, his own plans. She and Lily had survived before his arrival and would continue after his departure. That was the reality of their situation, regardless of whatever feelings might be growing between them. Rebecca turned from the window and began preparing for bed, determined to maintain her composure when morning came. She would be gracious but not clingy, grateful but not needy. She would wish him well, and then return to the business of keeping herself and Lily alive until spring brought new possibilities. These resolutions firm in her mind, Rebecca slipped into bed beside her daughter, pulling the blankets close against the night chill. Outside, the stars continued their cold vigil, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out beneath them. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed almost cruel, brilliant sunshine bouncing off the snow, the sky a perfect, heartless blue. Rebecca woke early, determined to face the day with dignity. She stoked the fire and began breakfast preparations, the routine providing a welcome distraction from her turbulent thoughts. Reese joined her soon after, having already tended to the animals. He moved with purpose, gathering his few possessions and checking his saddlebags. The preparations were methodical, practical, exactly what Rebecca would have expected from him, yet they stung nonetheless. "Beautiful day for traveling," she observed, striving for a conversational tone. "It is," he agreed, pausing in his preparations to accept the coffee she offered. "Should make good time to Sweetwater, barring any unexpected drifts." Lily woke then, her usual morning drowsiness evaporating when she registered Reese's travel preparations. "You're leaving today?" she asked, dismay clear in her voice. Reese knelt to her level, his expression gentle. "I am, Miss Lily. Got a job waiting for me, remember?" "But you could get a job here," she protested, looking around as if the small cabin might suddenly reveal employment opportunities. "You could help us with the animals and the garden when spring comes." "Lily," Rebecca warned, embarrassed by her daughter's directness. Reese, however, didn't seem bothered. "That's a fine offer, Miss Lily, and I'm honored, but your mama's perfectly capable of handling things here. And someday soon, you'll both be able to go wherever you choose." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I don't want you to go. Reese hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden figure, another of his carvings, this one a wolf with its head raised as if howling. I made this for you. To remember me by. Lily accepted the carving with reverent hands. It's beautiful. Like you, Reese said, chucking her gently under the chin. Now, I need you to be brave and help your mama, all right. She's the strongest lady I know, but even strong folks need a hand sometimes. This appeal to Lily's sense of responsibility worked better than any distraction might have. She nodded solemnly, clutching the wooden wolf. I promise. That's my girl. Reese straightened, his eyes meeting Rebecca's over Lily's head. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of what might have been under different circumstances. Breakfast was a subdued affair, despite their efforts to maintain conversation. When the meal was finished, Reese insisted on leaving most of his remaining supplies with them: coffee, sugar, and other staples that would see them through several more weeks. I can purchase more in Sweetwater, he said when Rebecca protested. You need these more than I do. Finally, there was nothing left to delay the inevitable. Reese had packed his saddlebags, prepared Samson for the journey, and said his goodbyes to Lily, who now stood in the doorway, trying valiantly not to cry. I'll walk you to the trail, Rebecca offered, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. Reese nodded and they set off together, Samson following obediently behind. The snow crunched beneath their feet, the only sound in the vast winter silence. At the point where the path from the cabin joined the main trail, they paused, facing each other in the brilliant morning light. Thank you, Rebecca said simply, for everything. Reese's expression was uncharacteristically vulnerable. I wish I could do more. You've done more than enough. You saved us. You would have found a way, he insisted. You're stronger than you know, Rebecca Wallace. She smiled slightly. Perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to test that theory. A moment of silence stretched between them, laden with things unsaid. Finally, Reese reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. I wrote down the ranch name and directions to Sweetwater, he said, handing it to her, in case you decide to head that way when spring comes. Rebecca accepted the paper, her fingers brushing his. Thank you. Reese hesitated, then added, there's work in Sweetwater, schools being built, businesses growing. It's a good place for new beginnings. The implication was clear, but neither of them quite dared to make it explicit. Rebecca tucked the paper carefully into her pocket. I'll keep that in mind. Another pause, heavy with possibility and restraint. Then Reese stepped forward and with gentle deliberation placed a hand on her cheek. His touch was warm against her cold skin, and Rebecca found herself leaning into it without conscious thought. Be safe, he murmured. Both of you. Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a brief, tender kiss that held both promise and farewell. Then he was mounting Samson, tipping his hat to her one last time and turning his horse toward the trail. Rebecca watched until horse and rider disappeared over the ridge, her emotions too complex to name. Then she turned and walked back to the cabin, to Lily, and to the uncertain future that awaited them. The days that followed Reese's departure took on a strange quality for Rebecca, at once familiar in their routines and utterly changed by his absence. The cabin, which had briefly felt like a home again, reverted to feeling like a place of survival, a shelter rather than a sanctuary. Lily asked about Reese often, wondering when he might visit, whether he had reached Sweetwater safely, what his new job might be like. Rebecca answered as honestly as she could, careful not to nurture false hope in her daughter while privately cherishing the memory of that single kiss and the paper tucked safely in her drawer. The supplies Reese had left sustained them well. Rebecca rationed carefully, but not desperately as before. The smoked venison provided protein they had sorely lacked, and with proper nutrition, both she and Lily regained some of the weight they had lost during their lean weeks. February gave way to March, bringing longer days and the first hints of thaw. The bitter cold loosened its grip gradually, and Rebecca began to believe that they might indeed survive until spring proper arrived. It was during a particularly warm spell in late March that Rebecca made her decision. She had been contemplating it for weeks, weighing options, considering risks, but the sight of green shoots pushing through the snow at the edge of the cabin clearing finally crystallized her resolve. Lily, she said that evening as they sat by the fire, how would you feel about going to a town called Sweetwater? Lily looked up from the wooden menagerie she was playing with, her eyes suddenly bright. Is that where Mr. Reese went? Rebecca nodded. It is. Would we see him there? We might, Rebecca answered carefully. But that's not the only reason to go. Sweetwater is growing. There would be other children for you to play with, a school for you to attend, and I might find work there. Lily considered this seriously. What about our house? We would sell it if we could find a buyer, or just leave it if necessary. The idea of abandoning the cabin didn't pain Rebecca as much as she had expected. Without Thomas, without his dreams attached to the place, it had become merely wood and nails to her. When would we go? Soon. As soon as the trails are fully clear. Rebecca hesitated, then added, It won't be easy, Lily. We'll have to pack what we can carry on the wagon, leave the rest behind, and we don't know what awaits us in Sweetwater. But Mr. Reese is there, Lily said with a child's perfect faith. And he'll help us. Rebecca didn't correct her daughter's assumption, though she knew the reality might be more complicated. Reese had offered directions and a suggestion, not a commitment. Months had passed since his departure. He might have changed his mind, moved on, or formed other attachments. Still, as she began preparations for their journey, Rebecca found herself holding on to hope not just of seeing Reese again, but of a fresh start, a chance to build something sustainable for herself and Lily. April brought genuine thaw and the greening of the landscape. Rebecca sold what she could to a trapper passing through the cow, the remaining chickens, some of Thomas's tools, and used the money to purchase supplies for their journey. The wagon, which had sat unused since Thomas's death, required repairs, but Rebecca managed with the skills she had developed out of necessity. By the end of April, they were ready. The wagon was loaded with their essential possessions: clothing, bedding, cooking equipment, Thomas's rifle, and the few mementos Rebecca couldn't bear to leave behind. Everything else remained in the cabin, a monument to a life that no longer fit them. On a clear morning, with birds singing in the newly leafed trees, Rebecca helped Lily into the wagon, took one last look at the cabin that had been their prison and shelter, and turned the horses toward the trail that would lead them to Sweetwater. The journey was arduous, but not impossible. Spring had transformed the landscape from a frozen wasteland to a vibrant, verdant expanse. Wildflowers dotted the meadows, and the air was alive with birdsong. Lily, who had known only winter's isolation for months, marveled at each new sight, her excitement infectious. They traveled carefully, making camp each evening before darkness fell, building small fires for warmth and protection. Rebecca kept the rifle close, though they encountered few travelers on the trail. Those they did meet were generally courteous, offering news of conditions ahead, and sometimes sharing a meal. On the third day, as they crested a rise, Sweetwater came into view in the valley below a sprawling town beside a winding river, with wooden buildings along a main street and homesteads dotting the surrounding countryside. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from a distance, they could see the movement of people and horses. "Is that it, Mama?" Lily asked, standing up in the wagon for a better view. "That's Sweetwater," Rebecca confirmed, feeling a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. This moment represented both an ending and a beginning, the final severance from their life with Thomas, and the first step toward whatever awaited them. "Do you think Mr. Reese is down there?" Lily shaded her eyes, as if she might spot him from their elevated position. "I don't know, sweetheart." It's a big town. Rebecca had the paper Reese had given her, with directions to the ranch where he had secured employment. Her plan was to find lodging in town first, establish themselves, and then perhaps inquire about Reese casually, without expectation, as one might ask after any acquaintance. They descended into the valley, the wagon wheels creaking on the rutted trail. As they approached the outskirts of town, signs of prosperity became more evident: new construction, well-maintained fences, fields being prepared for planting. Sweetwater was indeed growing, just as Reese had said. The main street bustled with activity: merchants hawking wares, cowboys lounging outside the saloon, women in calico dresses moving purposefully between shops. Rebecca guided the wagon carefully through the traffic, acutely aware of their dusty appearance after days on the trail. They found the hotel easily enough, a two-story wooden structure with a wide porch and a painted sign declaring Sweetwater Hotel clean rooms, fair prices. Rebecca parked the wagon and helped Lily down, brushing ineffectually at the dirt on their dresses before approaching the entrance. The hotel proprietor, a portly man with impressive mustaches, greeted them with professional courtesy. "Room for you and the little miss." "Yes, please," Rebecca said. "We're new to town, just arrived." "Welcome to Sweetwater, then." He pushed the register toward her. "Planning a short stay or looking to settle?" "Hoping to settle if things work out." Rebecca signed the register with her full name. "I'm seeking employment. I was a teacher before my marriage." The proprietor's eyebrows rose with interest. "Is that so?" "Town's been talking about hiring another teacher. School's overflowing with young-uns." He smiled at Lily. "Including this one soon, I'd wager." Rebecca felt a surge of hope. "Do you know who I should speak with about the position?" "Town council handles such matters." "Chairman's name is Peterson, has the mercantile down the street." He handed her a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs. Need help with your things?" "We can manage, thank you." The room was simple but clean, a bed large enough for her and Lily to share, a washstand, a small table with 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the main street. After the isolation of the cabin, the sounds of town life filtering through the glass were both strange and comforting. Rebecca helped Lily wash away the dust of travel, then attended to her own appearance. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she hardly recognized herself. The winter had left its mark in new lines around her eyes and mouth, and a few strands of silver threaded through her dark hair. But there was something else, too, a determination in her gaze that hadn't been there before, a steadiness born of survival. "Can we look for Mr. Reese now?" Lily asked as Rebecca braided her hair. "Not today, sweetheart. We need to get settled first." Seeing her daughter's disappointment, she added, "Tomorrow, we'll visit Mr. Peterson about the teaching position. And then, if you're very good, perhaps we can inquire about the ranch where Mr. Reese works." This compromise satisfied Lily, who was, in truth, too exhausted from the journey to do much exploring anyway. They ate a simple meal in the hotel dining room and retired early, both falling asleep almost instantly in the unfamiliar but comfortable bed. Morning brought renewed energy and purpose. Rebecca dressed them both in their best remaining clothes, faded but clean, and they set out to find the mercantile. The town was even more impressive by daylight, prosperous without being pretentious, busy with the commerce of a growing community. Peterson's Mercantile occupied a prime corner location, its windows displaying an impressive array of goods. Inside, the shelves were well stocked with everything from foodstuffs to fabric, hardware to housewares. A bell jingled as they entered, drawing the attention of a tall man arranging a display of tools. "Good morning," he greeted them. "Something I can help you find, Mr. Peterson?" Rebecca inquired. "That's me." He approached, wiping his hands on his apron. "Don't believe we've met." "Rebecca Wallace, and this is my daughter, Lily." Rebecca extended her hand, which Peterson shook with businesslike efficiency. "We've just arrived in Sweetwater. The hotel proprietor mentioned you might be the person to speak with about a teaching position." Peterson's expression brightened. "Indeed, you've come to the right place. We've been looking to hire an additional teacher these past 2 months. He studied her with new interest. "You have experience. 3 years in a school near Boston before my marriage, and I've been teaching my daughter at home since." Credentials. "I studied at the normal school in Framingham. I can provide references, though it would take time for letters to arrive." Peterson nodded thoughtfully. "We're not in a position to wait on Eastern references, but I tell you what, the council meets tomorrow evening. Come by, present yourself, answer some questions. If you seem suitable, we might arrange a trial period." Rebecca's heart leapt. "That would be more than fair, thank you. No promises, mind you, but we're in need and you're here." Peterson glanced at Lily. "Your husband?" "Widowed," Rebecca replied simply. Peterson's expression softened slightly. "Sorry to hear it. Tough country for a woman alone." "We manage," Rebecca said, the phrase almost reflexive by now. Their business concluded, Rebecca thanked Peterson again and led Lily back onto the street. The encounter had gone better than she dared hope, a potential position already, with no need to pursue other, less desirable forms of employment. "Can we find Mr. Reese now?" Lily asked as they stepped into the sunshine. Rebecca hesitated. Part of her wanted to delay that particular errand, to establish themselves independently before seeking out the man who had come to mean so much to them both. But Lily's hopeful expression was difficult to resist. "All right," she agreed. "But remember, sweetheart, Mr. Reese might be very busy with his new job, or he might have moved on. We mustn't expect too much." Lily nodded solemnly, though Rebecca suspected her cautions were falling on deaf ears. Her daughter had built Reese into something of a hero in her mind during their months apart, and reality, whatever it might be, would have a hard time competing with that image. They returned to the hotel to retrieve the paper with directions to the ranch. The proprietor, helpful as before, provided guidance on the best route and estimated the distance at about 3 miles outside town. Too far to walk with Lily, Rebecca decided to use their wagon, though the horses were still tired from the journey. The road leading out of town was well traveled, winding through rolling grasslands dotted with spring wildflowers. Lily sat beside Rebecca on the wagon seat, scanning the horizon as if expecting Reese to appear at any moment. The ranch came into view gradually, first the fence line, then outbuildings, and finally the main house, a substantial 2-story structure with a wide porch. A painted sign at the entrance gate read "Circle P Ranch." As they approached, Rebecca could see activity in the yard, men working with horses in a corral, others moving between buildings with purposeful strides. Her heart beat faster, though she told herself it was merely nervousness at the prospect of inquiring after Reese, not anticipation of seeing him. She drew the wagon to a halt near the main house, where a man in a well-worn hat was directing the activities from the porch. He approached as Rebecca helped Lily down. "Afternoon, madam," he greeted them, his expression curious but not unwelcoming. "Something I can help you with?" "I hope so," Rebecca replied, suddenly unsure of how to frame her inquiry. "I'm looking for someone who might be employed here, a Mr. Reese Jameson." The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're friends of Reese's?" "Yes," Rebecca said, relief washing through her at the present tense in the man's question. "Reese was still here, still employed at this ranch. He helped us during the winter when we were in difficult circumstances." The man's expression cleared. "Ah, you must be the widow and child he mentioned, from up near Bear Creek." "Yes," Rebecca confirmed, oddly touched that Reese had spoken of them. "Is he available? We've just arrived in Sweetwater, and I thought—" She trailed off, unsure how to explain her presence without revealing too much. The man who introduced himself as Peterson, owner of the Circle P, shook his head. "Afraid Reese isn't here at the moment. He and some of the boys are moving cattle to the north pasture. Won't be back till tomorrow, likely." Disappointment settled in Rebecca's chest, though she maintained a polite smile. "I see. Well, we won't disturb your work then. Perhaps another time." "He'll be sorry to have missed you," Peterson said, his eyes thoughtful as they moved between Rebecca and Lily. "Been talking about riding out to check on you folks once the spring roundup was finished." This revelation caused a flutter in Rebecca's stomach. "Has he, indeed? Seemed quite concerned about your welfare." Peterson smiled at Lily. "Especially the little miss here." Lily, who had been unusually quiet during the exchange, finally spoke up. "Is Mr. Reese coming back tomorrow for certain?" Peterson chuckled. "Barring any unforeseen circumstances, yes, you're welcome to return then." Or, he glanced at Rebecca. "I could send word when he arrives if you're staying in town." "We're at the Sweetwater Hotel," Rebecca said, "and yes, a message would be most appreciated." She hesitated, then added, "Please don't trouble yourself to send someone immediately, whenever it's convenient." Peterson's eyes twinkled, as if he understood the complex emotions behind her request. "Of course, madam, whenever it's convenient." They thanked him and returned to the wagon, Lily subdued by the disappointment of not seeing Reese immediately but buoyed by the promise of tomorrow. As they drove back toward town, Rebecca found herself simultaneously relieved and disappointed, relieved to have more time to prepare herself, disappointed to delay the reunion she had been anticipating, though she scarcely admitted it to herself, for months. The remainder of the day passed in practical matters, securing their possessions in the hotel room, purchasing a few necessities from the mercantile, and exploring the town that might become their new home. Rebecca was particularly interested in the schoolhouse, a sturdy building at the edge of town with a playground where several children were engaged in noisy games, despite the school day having ended. "This is where you'd go to school if we stay in Sweetwater," Rebecca told Lily, who watched the playing children with fascinated longing. "And you'd be my teacher, perhaps. Or perhaps I'd teach the older children and you'd have a different teacher." Rebecca smoothed Lily's hair. "Would you like that, to go to school with other children?" Lily nodded emphatically. "Yes, but..." Her expression grew uncertain. "What about our cabin and Papa's grave?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. They had buried Thomas on a small rise behind the cabin, marking the spot with a wooden cross. In the rush of preparations for leaving, Rebecca hadn't given much thought to what it meant to leave his remains behind. "We can visit sometimes," she said finally. "And we'll always remember Papa, no matter where we live." Lily accepted this with the resilience of childhood, her attention already returning to the playing children. One of them, a girl about Lily's age, noticed her watching and waved cheerfully. After a moment's hesitation, Lily waved back. "See," Rebecca said softly, "you're making friends already." They returned to the hotel as dusk was falling, tired but with a sense of accomplishment. Rebecca had secured a meeting with the town council about the teaching position and had located Reese, or at least confirmed his continued employment at the Circle P. These were significant steps forward, regardless of what tomorrow might bring. As she helped Lily prepare for bed, Rebecca found herself thinking of Reese, wondering what his reaction would be to their arrival, whether he would be pleased or merely surprised, whether the connection they had begun to form during those snowbound days had been real or merely a product of isolation and gratitude. "Mama," Lily's voice broke into her thoughts. "Are you excited to see Mr. Reese tomorrow?" Rebecca tucked the blankets around her daughter. "I'm looking forward to thanking him properly for his help this winter. But are you excited?" Lily persisted with a child's unerring instinct for emotional truth. Rebecca hesitated, then admitted, "Yes, sweetheart, I'm excited and a little nervous too." "Why nervous? Mr. Reese is nice." "He is," Rebecca agreed, "but it's been months since we saw him. People change. Circumstances change." Lily considered this with surprising thoughtfulness. "Do you think he's forgotten us?" "No," Rebecca said honestly. "Mr. Peterson said Reese was planning to check on us. He remembers us." This reassurance was enough for Lily, who snuggled deeper into the bedding and was soon asleep. Rebecca remained awake longer, watching the lamplight flicker on the ceiling and trying to manage her expectations for tomorrow's meeting. Morning brought a message from the Circle P, a brief note delivered by a young ranch hand informing them that Reese had returned and would be in town that afternoon on ranch business, if they wished to meet him at the hotel around 2 o'clock. The formality of the arrangement both amused and unsettled Rebecca. Their last meeting had been an emotional farewell at the edge of a snow-covered trail. Their next would be a scheduled appointment in a hotel lobby. Despite the strangeness, Rebecca found herself taking extra care with her appearance that morning. She wore her best remaining dress, a deep blue that Thomas had always said brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her hair more carefully than she had in months. Lily, sensing the importance of the occasion, was similarly particular about her own appearance, insisting that Rebecca braid her hair the special way with a ribbon threaded through. At 1:45, they were settled in the hotel lobby, Lily clutching her wooden wolf carving and Rebecca pretending to read a newspaper while actually watching the door with nervous anticipation. The clock had just struck 2 when the hotel doors opened, and Reese stepped inside. The sight of him solid, real, exactly as she remembered yet somehow more substantial in this new context, made Rebecca's heart leap in a way that no amount of preparation could have prevented. He paused just inside the doorway, scanning the lobby. When his gaze fell on them, his face transformed with a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. Before Rebecca could rise to greet him properly, Lily had launched herself across the lobby with a cry of delight. "Mr. Reese, you came back." Reese knelt to catch her, lifting her into a hug that spoke volumes about his genuine affection for the child. "Miss Lily, look at you growing like a weed and twice as pretty." Lily giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. We came to find you. Mama said we couldn't stay at the cabin anymore, and I said we should come where you are, and she said maybe, and now we're here. Reese's eyes met Rebecca's over Lily's shoulder, his expression a complex mixture of surprise, pleasure, and something deeper that made her breath catch. Carefully, he set Lily down and straightened, removing his hat as Rebecca approached. Mrs. Wallace. He greeted her, his voice warm but formal, respecting the public setting. Mr. Jameson, she returned, equally formal though her heart was racing. It's good to see you again. Likewise. He glanced around the lobby, which had begun to fill with other guests. Perhaps we might find somewhere more private to talk. The hotel has a small garden in back, I believe. Rebecca nodded, grateful for the suggestion. They followed Reese through the hotel and out to a modest but pleasant garden area, where wrought iron benches were arranged beneath flowering trees. At this hour, the space was deserted, affording them the privacy that their reunion deserved. As soon as they were seated, Lily launched into an enthusiastic account of their journey to Sweetwater, their meeting with Peterson about the teaching position, and their visit to the Circle P the previous day. Reese listened with genuine interest, asking questions that delighted Lily with their specificity. Eventually, Lily's torrent of information slowed, allowing Reese to turn his attention more fully to Rebecca. A teaching position, that's promising. Nothing certain yet, Rebecca cautioned. But yes, it seems there might be an opportunity. The town's growing fast, Reese agreed. Not enough teachers to keep pace with all the new families arriving. He hesitated, then asked more directly, what made you decide to come to Sweetwater specifically? The question hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Rebecca considered a diplomatic answer but opted for honesty instead. You suggested it might be a good place for new beginnings, and we missed you. The simple admission seemed to catch Reese off guard. He glanced at Lily, who had wandered a few steps away to examine a flowering bush, then back to Rebecca. I missed you both as well, he said quietly, more than I expected to. The confession, offered without artifice, warmed Rebecca from within. I wasn't sure, she admitted. If you'd remember us, or if we were just an interlude during a storm, Reese's expression grew serious. Rebecca, those days in your cabin, they meant a great deal to me. I've thought of you and Lily often, asked myself if I should have stayed or at least returned sooner. He shook his head slightly. But I didn't want to impose. You're a strong woman, independent. I wasn't sure my presence would be welcome beyond the emergency that brought us together. It would have been, Rebecca said softly. It is. Their gazes held for a long moment, the connection between them palpable despite the months of separation. Then Lily returned, breaking the tension with a child's perfect timing. Mr. Reese, are you still working at the ranch with the horses? He smiled, shifting his attention to her. I am. Ranch manager, just like I hoped, keeping busy with spring calving and preparing for summer grazing. Do you live there, at the ranch? I do. Mr. Peterson provides housing for key staff. Nothing fancy, but it's my own place, first time I've had that in years. Rebecca listened as the conversation continued, Lily's questions drawing out details of Reese's life in Sweetwater. He seemed settled, content with his position and the community he had found. The realization both pleased and unsettled her, pleased that he had found stability, unsettled at the reminder that he had built a life here independent of them. As the afternoon light began to soften, Reese glanced at the sky. I should get back to the ranch soon. Still have evening chores to oversee. Disappointment flickered across Lily's face. Will we see you again, soon, if your mama doesn't object, Reese replied, looking to Rebecca for confirmation. Of course not, she assured him. You're welcome to visit anytime. Reese hesitated, then suggested, perhaps you both might come out to the ranch on Sunday. It's my day off. I could show you around, introduce you properly to Mr. Peterson and his family. They often host Sunday dinner for the ranch staff. The invitation was both casual and significant, a step toward integrating Rebecca and Lily into his new life. An opportunity to see if their connection could transition from the isolated intimacy of the cabin to the broader context of community. We'd like that, Rebecca said, speaking for both of them, though Lily's enthusiastic nodding made her answer redundant. Good, Reese smiled, the expression transforming his weather-lined face. "I'll come to town with the wagon to fetch you around 10 if that suits." They agreed on the arrangement, and Reese walked them back through the hotel to the front entrance. There, he shook Rebecca's hand formally, though his grip lingered a moment longer than strictly proper. To Lily, he offered a small bow that made her giggle with delight. "Until Sunday, ladies," he said, settling his hat back on his head. Rebecca and Lily watched him stride down the street toward where his horse was hitched outside the mercantile. When he mounted and rode away, Lily sighed with dramatic contentment. "He's still the same," she declared. "Still nice and still makes you smile." Rebecca flushed slightly at her daughter's observation but didn't deny it. "Yes, he seems to be the same man we knew." As they returned to their room, Rebecca found herself filled with a cautious optimism. The meeting had gone well better than she had dared hope. Reese had been genuinely pleased to see them, had missed them as they had missed him. The connection between them remained, though what it might become was still uncertain. For now, it was enough that they had found each other again, that the possibility of something more substantial than a storm-bound interlude existed. Rebecca had made the journey to Sweetwater, seeking a fresh start for herself and Lily. Whether that start would include Reese remained to be seen, but for the first time in months, perhaps years, the future seemed full of promise rather than merely challenge. The intervening days passed quickly. Rebecca met with the town council on Friday evening and was provisionally offered the teaching position, pending observation of her methods during a 2-week trial period. The salary, while modest, would be sufficient for their basic needs, and the position included a small house near the schoolyard, a benefit that would free them from the expense of continued hotel lodging. "Congratulations," the hotel proprietor said when Rebecca shared the news. "Town's fortunate to find someone with Eastern education willing to settle here." "I'm the fortunate one," Rebecca replied honestly. "Not many places would offer such an opportunity to a woman in my circumstances." By Sunday morning, Rebecca and Lily were packed and ready well before the appointed hour. Lily, particularly, was practically vibrating with anticipation, changing her hair ribbon twice and insisting on wearing her best dress, despite Rebecca's caution that ranch visits often involved dust and dirt. "But we're having dinner with Mr. Peterson's family," Lily reasoned. "That's fancy, isn't it?" "Sunday dinner at a ranch is comfortable, not fancy," Rebecca explained. "But yes, your best dress is appropriate." When Reese arrived with the wagon, Rebecca was struck again by how naturally he seemed to fit into their lives, despite the months of separation. He helped them into the wagon with easy courtesy, stowed their small travel bag, and set off toward the ranch with Lily between them on the seat, chattering happily about the sights of Sweetwater. The Circle P looked even more impressive in the clear light of a spring Sunday, the buildings well maintained, the corrals and pastures neatly fenced, cattle grazing contentedly in the distance. As they approached the main house, Rebecca could see a woman on the porch, presumably Mrs. Peterson, arranging flowers in a large vase. "That's the boss's wife, Sarah," Reese confirmed. "Kindest woman you'll ever meet, treats the ranch hands like family." The introduction went smoothly, Sarah Peterson welcoming them with genuine warmth. "Reese has told us about your winter ordeal," she said, leading them into the spacious main house. "I'm so glad you've come to Sweetwater. The town needs good people, especially those who have proven their resilience." The Peterson family, which included 3 children ranging from 10 to 16, was indeed welcoming, making Rebecca and Lily feel immediately at ease. Several other ranch employees joined them for the substantial Sunday meal, the conversation flowing easily around the long table. Rebecca observed Reese in this setting with interest. He was clearly respected by both the Petersons and the other ranch hands, his opinions sought on various matters, his quiet humor appreciated. He had found a place here. She realized a community and purpose that suited him. After the meal, while the older Peterson children entertained Lily in the yard, Reese offered to show Rebecca his quarters, a small but well-built cabin a short distance from the main house. "It's nothing grand," he cautioned, as they walked along a path bordered by young cottonwood trees. "But it's private and solid." The cabin proved to be exactly as he described, a single room with a small attached lean-to kitchen, simply but comfortably furnished. A bed with a handmade quilt, a table with 2 chairs, a dresser, and a small bookshelf containing more volumes than Rebecca would have expected. A window faced west, capturing the afternoon sunlight that streamed across the polished wood floor. "It's lovely," Rebecca said sincerely. "You've made it a home." Reese watched her as she moved around the small space, noting the personal touches: a carved wooden box on the dresser, a sketch of mountains pinned to the wall, a coffee mug painted with wildflowers. "First real home I've had since I left my parents' place at 17, he admitted. "Takes some getting used to, having a place that's truly mine." Rebecca understood the sentiment all too well. The cabin she had shared with Thomas had never fully felt like hers. It had been his dream, his choice, his vision for their life. Even the sparse furnishings had been selected primarily for practicality or his preferences. "The teaching position comes with housing," she said, moving to the window to look out at the view. "A small house near the school, nothing fancy, they warned me, but sound and with a garden plot." Reese joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance while still standing close enough for private conversation. "You accepted the position then, provisionally. There's a 2-week trial period beginning tomorrow. Congratulations." His smile was warm, genuinely pleased for her. "I had no doubt they'd recognize your qualifications." "Hardly that," Rebecca demurred. "They're simply in need of teachers. I was in the right place at the right time." "Like me at your cabin," Reese observed quietly. The comparison hung between them, laden with meaning. Rebecca turned slightly to face him. "Was it just timing, do you think? Just chance that brought you to our door that night?" Reese considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "I don't know," he said finally. "I'm not much given to believing in fate or divine intervention, but sometimes—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes things align in ways that seem more than coincidental. I had no reason to take that particular trail that night. Could have waited out the storm in the last town I'd passed through, yet something drew me onward." The admission resonated with Rebecca's own feelings about their meeting, the sense that something greater than chance had been at work, guiding them toward each other at precisely the moment when both needed what the other could provide. "I've thought about you and Lily every day since I left," Reese continued, his voice low and earnest. "Wondered if I should have stayed or at least returned sooner, but I didn't want to presume. You're a proud woman, Rebecca Wallace, and rightly so. I wasn't sure my continued presence would be welcome once the immediate need had passed." Rebecca's heart quickened at his words. "It would have been," she said softly. "Very welcome." Reese's gaze held hers, searching. "And now? Now that you're here in Sweetwater, establishing yourself and Lily independently, as you should, is there room in your new life for someone else?" The directness of the question took Rebecca's breath away. In that moment, the months of separation seemed to vanish, and they were back in her cabin on the last night before his departure, the unspoken connection between them palpable in the firelight. "I think," she said carefully, "that any life worth building has room for people who matter. And you, Reese Jameson, matter to us a great deal." It wasn't quite the declaration of feeling that part of her longed to make, but it was honest and open to possibility. Reese seemed to understand both what she said and what she left unsaid, for his expression softened into a smile that reached his eyes. "I'm glad to hear it," he said simply. Then, with gentle deliberation, he reached out and took her hand in a gesture of connection that honored the boundary of their still developing relationship while acknowledging the deeper currents beneath. They returned to the main house hand in hand, a subtle but visible signal of their understanding to those observant enough to notice. Sarah Peterson's knowing smile suggested she fell into that category, though she made no comment beyond offering them coffee on the porch while Lily continued playing with the Peterson children. The remainder of the day passed pleasantly, with Reese showing them more of the ranch, the stables where Samson now resided in comfort, the calving barn where new life entered the world each spring, the creek that wound through the property providing water and respite from summer heat. As evening approached, Reese drove them back to town, the conversation flowing easily between all three. When they reached the hotel, he helped them down from the wagon with the same courtesy he had shown that morning, though his hand lingered slightly longer in Rebecca's. "I'll come by tomorrow after you've finished at the school," he said, "if you'd like to tell me how your first day went." "I'd like that very much," Rebecca replied. Lily, not to be left out, demanded and received her own special goodbye, a formal handshake that Reese solemnly offered as between equals. "Until tomorrow, Miss Lily, take care of your mama for me." "I will," Lily promised gravely, "and you take care of Samson." As they watched the wagon depart, Lily slipped her hand into Rebecca's. "Mr. Reese likes us a lot," she observed. Rebecca smiled down at her perceptive daughter. "Yes, I believe he does. And we like him a lot too, right?" "We do," Rebecca confirmed, leading Lily into the hotel. "Very much." That night, as Lily slept beside her, Rebecca found herself contemplating the path that had led them to this moment: the tragedy of Thomas's death, the desperate winter, Reese's timely arrival, and now their new beginning in Sweetwater. Each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring them here. For the first time since Thomas's passing, perhaps longer, Rebecca felt truly hopeful about the future, not merely determined to survive it, but eager to embrace what it might hold. Whatever developed between her and Reese, whether friendship or something deeper, she was grateful for his presence in their lives and for the unexpected second chance they had been given. Rebecca's trial period as teacher proved successful beyond her expectations. The children of Sweetwater, though less formally educated than her previous students in Boston, were eager to learn and respectful of her authority. The town council, impressed with her methods and manner, confirmed her appointment after just 1 week rather than the planned 2. "No sense delaying the inevitable," Peterson explained when he delivered the news. "You're exactly what the school needs, Mrs. Wallace." With her position secured, Rebecca and Lily moved into the teacher's house, a modest structure with 2 bedrooms, a combination kitchen and living area, and a small porch overlooking the schoolyard. While sparsely furnished with just the basics provided by the town, it offered privacy and permanence they had lacked at the hotel. Throughout this transition, Reese was a steady presence, helping with the move, making small repairs to the house, bringing occasional gifts of fresh vegetables from the ranch garden or books he thought Rebecca might enjoy. His visits became a regular feature of their lives, anticipated by both Rebecca and Lily with increasing warmth. As spring bloomed into full summer, their relationship deepened. They were cautious, both aware of the scrutiny small town life invited and respectful of the need to set a proper example for Lily and Rebecca's students. Yet there was no denying the growing attachment between them, evident in shared glances, conversations that lasted late into the evening, and an increasing ease in each other's company. "The Petersons are hosting a dance at the ranch next Saturday," Reese mentioned one evening as they sat on Rebecca's porch, watching Lily chase fireflies in the twilight. "A sort of midsummer celebration. I was hoping you and Lily might attend with me." The invitation, while casual in delivery, carried significance. A public social event attended together would signal to the community that their relationship had progressed beyond mere friendship. "We'd be delighted," Rebecca replied, her heart quickening at the prospect. "Though I should warn you, my dancing skills are somewhat rusty," Reese smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she had come to cherish. "Mine too, we can be rusty together." The dance proved to be a pivotal evening. The Petersons had transformed their barn into a festive space, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and a small band of local musicians providing lively tunes. The entire community seemed to be in attendance, ranch hands and townspeople alike, from the elderly to infants carried in their mothers' arms. Rebecca wore her best dress, recently altered with fabric purchased from her first teacher's salary. Lily, equally dressed up, was immediately absorbed into a group of children playing tag around the barn's perimeter, leaving Rebecca and Reese to navigate the social waters together. "You look beautiful," Reese said simply as they stood at the edge of the impromptu dance floor, watching couples twirl to a spirited reel. "Thank you." Rebecca felt a flutter of nervousness that had nothing to do with the public setting and everything to do with the man beside her. "You clean up rather well yourself," Reese chuckled, running a finger around his collar. "Don't often wear a proper shirt with a tie, feels strange, but appropriate for the occasion." Rebecca smiled up at him, struck again by how thoroughly this man had come to matter to her, and very handsome. The music shifted to a waltz, and Reese extended his hand in invitation. "Shall we?" Taking his hand, Rebecca allowed him to lead her onto the floor. His arm encircled her waist with gentle firmness, maintaining a respectable distance while still drawing her closer than they had ever stood before. As they began to move in time with the music, Rebecca found that her body remembered the steps even if her mind had forgotten them. "Not so rusty after all," Reese observed, guiding her through a turn. "A testament to my teacher, perhaps," Rebecca replied. "You dance very well for a cowboy." "My mother's influence. She insisted both her sons learn proper dancing, said it was a skill no gentleman should lack." His expression softened with memory. "She'd have liked you, I think." "Would she?" The observation touched Rebecca deeply. What was she like? As they continued to waltz, Reese spoke of his mother, a strong-willed woman who had followed her husband west from Virginia, establishing a home in Nebraska territory in the early days when comforts were few and dangers many. He described her practicality, her insistence on maintaining certain civilized traditions despite frontier conditions, her unwavering support of her son's education. "She sounds remarkable," Rebecca said when he had finished. "You must miss her terribly." "Every day," Reese admitted. "She passed 5 years ago. My father followed less than a year later, just seemed to lose his purpose without her." They were truly partners then, in every sense. Reese's gaze was reflective. "That's rare, I think. To find someone who complements you so completely that life seems diminished without them." The observation hung between them as the music drew to a close. They remained on the floor as a new, livelier tune began, other couples swirling around them. In that moment, surrounded by noise and movement, Rebecca felt as though they were the only two people in the room, connected by something deeper than the physical touch of hand to waist. "Rebecca," Reese began, his voice low and serious. But before he could continue, Lily appeared beside them, flushed with excitement. "Mama, Mr. Reese, Mrs. Peterson says they're going to cut the cake soon, and I can help serve if you say it's all right." The moment broken, Rebecca turned her attention to her daughter. "Of course it's all right if Mrs. Peterson asked for your help." Lily beamed, then turned to Reese with equal enthusiasm. "Will you dance with me after? Just one dance, please?" Reese's serious expression melted into a smile. "It would be my honor, Miss Lily." Satisfied, Lily darted off to find Mrs. Peterson, leaving Rebecca and Reese to make their way to the refreshment table. Whatever Reese had been about to say remained unspoken, though the look he gave Rebecca as they parted he to help with setting up tables, she to assist with serving suggested the conversation was merely postponed, not abandoned. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of activity, cake and coffee, more dancing, including Reese's promised dance with Lily, which drew smiles from onlookers. Conversations with neighbors both new and familiar. Throughout it all, Rebecca was acutely aware of Reese's presence, even when they were separated by the width of the barn. It was late when they finally departed, Lily half asleep against Reese's shoulder as he carried her to the wagon. The drive back to town was quiet, the night air cool after the warmth of the barn, the sky ablaze with stars. When they reached Rebecca's house, Reese carried Lily inside and placed her gently on her bed. Rebecca removed her daughter's shoes and covered her with a light blanket, then rejoined Reese on the porch. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly, aware of the sleeping child just inside. "It was wonderful." Reese nodded, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out at the schoolyard bathed in moonlight. "Rebecca," he began again, picking up the thread that had been interrupted earlier. "I need to say something, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me finish before responding." Heart quickening, Rebecca nodded. "Of course." Reese took a deep breath. "When I found you and Lily last winter, I was just passing through, had no intention of staying in one place longer than necessary, no plans beyond the next job, the next town." That had been my life for so long, I couldn't imagine anything else. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But those days in your cabin, they changed something in me, reminded me what it feels like to be needed, to be part of something more than just my own survival. He turned to face her directly, his expression earnest in the moonlight. I came to Sweetwater because it seemed like a good opportunity, but I stayed because I couldn't stop thinking about you and Lily. Hoping you might find your way here too, though I tried not to let myself believe it would actually happen. Rebecca remained silent, as promised, though her heart was racing. These past months, seeing you build a life here, watching Lily flourish, being allowed to be part of it all in some small way, it's been the greatest joy of my life. Reese's voice had grown husky with emotion. What I'm trying to say, not very eloquently, is that I love you, Rebecca Wallace. You and Lily both. And if you could see your way clear to considering a future that includes me not just as a friend who visits, but as a husband and father, I would count myself the most fortunate man alive. The declaration, so plainly stated yet so profound in its implications, filled Rebecca with a surge of emotion so intense she found it difficult to speak. Reese waited, patient as always, giving her the space to find her words. Reese, she began finally, when Thomas died, I thought my chance at happiness had ended. Not because our marriage was perfect, it wasn't, but because I couldn't imagine starting over, trusting again, building something new. She took a step closer to him. Then you came to our door that night and everything changed. You didn't just bring food and firewood, you brought hope when we needed it most. She reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. I think I've loved you since that first evening when you sat by our fire and treated Lily's questions with such respect. I just didn't allow myself to recognize it until much later. The admission hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Reese's hand tightened around hers, his eyes searching her face. You're sure it's not gratitude or convenience speaking? I'm sure, Rebecca affirmed. What I feel for you goes beyond gratitude. It's deeper, truer than anything I've known before. She smiled slightly. And as for convenience, there's nothing particularly convenient about loving a man whose work keeps him 3 miles outside of town. This drew a chuckle from Reese, the tension easing from his shoulders. Fair point. I love you, Rebecca said again, the words coming easier now. And I would be honored to build a future with you, if you're certain that's what you want. More certain than I've ever been of anything. Reese's free hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. May I kiss you, Rebecca Wallace? In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise, the culmination of a connection that had begun in the depths of winter and blossomed in the warmth of spring and summer. When they parted, Reese rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with her own. I should go, he murmured reluctantly. It's late and propriety demands it. Rebecca nodded, though she was loath to end this perfect moment. When will you speak to Lily? Tomorrow, if you think she's ready, or we can wait. Give her more time to adjust to the idea. Tomorrow is perfect, Rebecca assured him. She's been hoping for this since the day you left our cabin. I suspect her reaction will be enthusiasm rather than surprise. Reese smiled, pressing one more gentle kiss to her lips before stepping back. Until tomorrow, then. Rebecca watched him drive away, her heart full to bursting with joy and anticipation. The path that had led them here had been neither straight nor easy, but standing on her porch under the vast starry sky, she felt a profound sense of rightness, as if all the pieces of her life, scattered by tragedy and hardship, were finally falling into their proper places. Lily's reaction the next day was, as predicted, one of unalloyed delight. When Reese formally asked her permission to marry her mother and become her father, she launched herself into his arms with a squeal of joy that likely could be heard across the schoolyard. I knew it. She exclaimed, her small face alight with triumph. I told Mama you would stay if we came to find you, Reese laughed, lifting her high in a celebratory swing. Seems you're wiser than both of us, Miss Lily. We should have listened to you sooner. The wedding took place in early September, as summer's heat began to soften toward autumn. It was a simple ceremony in the small church that served Sweetwater, attended by the entire community that had so warmly embraced Rebecca and Lily. Sarah Peterson had insisted on hosting the reception at the ranch, transforming the same barn where Rebecca and Reese had danced together into a space of celebration with flowers, ribbons, and tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household in the area. As the bride and groom shared their first dance as husband and wife, Reese held Rebecca close, his expression one of wonder and contentment. "Happy Mrs. Jameson," Rebecca smiled up at him, savoring the new name and all it represented. "Completely, and you, more than I ever thought possible." His gaze moved to where Lily was dancing with Mr. Peterson, her laughter ringing clear above the music. "Both of you have given me a gift I never expected to receive." "What's that?" Rebecca asked. "Home," Reese answered simply. "Not just a place, but a feeling, belonging, purpose beyond myself." The observation resonated deeply with Rebecca's own experience. "That's exactly what you've given us too," she said softly. "A sense that we're exactly where we're meant to be." After the wedding, they moved to Reese's cabin on the Circle P, which Peterson had generously allowed them to expand with an additional room for Lily. Rebecca continued teaching at the school, making the daily journey between town and ranch with pleasure rather than inconvenience, knowing that at day's end, home and family awaited. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Rebecca found herself reflecting often on the journey that had brought them to this point. The desperate winter that had seemed like an ending had, in fact, been a beginning. The hunger and cold that had threatened to consume them had instead led them to abundance and warmth beyond anything they could have imagined. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their expanded cabin watching Lily play with the puppy Reese had surprised her with after the wedding, Rebecca voiced these thoughts. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out if you hadn't seen our chimney smoke that night? If you had taken a different trail or stayed in the last town?" Reese considered the question with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Sometimes. But then I look at you and Lily, at this life we're building, and I can't imagine any other outcome." He took her hand, his touch still sending warmth through her after months of marriage. "Maybe some things are just meant to be, despite all the odds against them." Rebecca leaned against his shoulder, watching as Lily's laughter rose into the evening air, a sound of pure joy that embodied all their hopes for the future. "I think you're right," she said softly. "Some things are simply meant to be." And as the sun set over the Wyoming territory, casting long shadows across the land that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving, Rebecca Jameson gave thanks for the storm that had brought unexpected blessings: a hungry child fed, a stranger's kindness, and a love that had transformed darkness into light, winter into spring, solitude into family. The end.